Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you guys, as always, for joining us. This week, we're going to look back at the record-breaking event at Barclays Center in Brooklyn last Saturday and Tank Davis's big win in the main event. This has been a great run for boxing thus far in 2022, and that continues Saturday night as undefeated, unified 122-pound champion Stephen Fulton defends his title against former unified champ Danny Roman. We'll get into that in a sec. Plus, in this week's toe-to-toe segment, Mike and I will list 5 potential opponents we want to see Tank Davis face next. But first, some important bit of news this week. Former unified heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua has a new head trainer. Joshua had been trained by longtime coach Robert McCracken, but heading into a rematch with Alexander Usyk, the man who took away his titles by outpointing him last year, Joshua has decided to join forces with none other than Robert Garcia. Mike, what are your thoughts on this pairing?
I don't know why, but I was a little bit surprised. It's kind of hard for me to explain. It just seems like an odd pairing in a way because, you know, I've known Robert forever. He's based here in LA and Joshua's from so far away, but I guess that's boxing. I think it's a good choice by Joshua. Robert, obviously, I'm stating the obvious by saying that Robert's an excellent trainer. Learned the ropes from his father. You remember his father trained both Fernando Vargas and him many years ago. The guys he trains he sort of has an aggressive style, which I think might suit Joshua in the fight against the smaller Usyk. I think it's a really good pairing because of the respect I have for Robert.
Yeah, I think it's a very well. Look, hiring Robert Garcia is always a good move, in my opinion. As you said, he's an excellent trainer, a former world champion. We know his roster: Mikey Garcia, Jesse Bam Rodriguez, a long list of top fighters that he's worked with. And you also brought up the fact that he's a little more offensive minded, which is what Anthony Joshua needs, and perhaps he can train him to fight that way. Although I do think back in the day when Roy Jones fought Glenn Kelly, and Kelly, who was sort of mild-mannered and laid back in his approach, was trained by the exact opposite personality in Jeff Fennick. And during the fight, Emmanuel Stewart remarked, well, you know, if Fennick was fighting, he'd get in there. He'd probably give Roy a better fight. So I don't know if Garcia can inject some of that into Joshua, but I think it's a great choice. And I'm looking forward to the rematch. Does this move change your thoughts on the Usyk rematch?
You know, not really. I think I'm probably giving Joshua a better chance than most people have of avenging the earlier loss. I mean, I'm going to probably pick, I haven't decided, but I'm going to probably pick Usyk to win based on what we saw and sort of where they're at in their careers. I just thought this, as long as Joshua landed a good trainer, and this is a really good trainer, I gave him a pretty good chance. So I don't think it really changes much. But again, I feel good about the pairing. So you know, maybe I should be a little bit more optimistic for him that he could do better than in the first fight.
Yeah, I think he can. I think it's just something different. You know, maybe if he trains in the U.S., he gets different kind of sparring. Who knows? But
he's training over there, though, apparently.
Oh, is he?
Going to England.
Going over there. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, still, you know, a different voice in his ear, maybe someone who studied the fight and sees things differently. I wasn't entirely convinced Usyk was going to win the rematch either. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to it either way, and I guess we'll see what what happens and what we hear coming out of that camp. Anyway, let us move on to the PBC Fight of the Week. This Saturday, June 4th, WBC and WBO World 122-pound champion Stephen Fulton Jr. puts his belt and his undefeated record on the line against former unified champ Danny Roman in one of the best matchups of 2012, one of the best matchups that could be made in the division. The action takes place at the Armory in Minneapolis, live on Showtime, beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go once again. Fulton 20-0, 8 knockouts. Roman 29, 3-1 with 10 KOs. Obviously, Fulton's 5-0 in his last 5 with 1 knockout. Roman is 4-1, 1 knockout. Last fight for Fulton was Brandon Figueroa, majority decision victory on November 27, memorable fight. For Roman, it's Ricardo Franco, unanimous decision on May 15th of last year. Fulton has a 40% knockout ratio, Roman 30. Fulton 131 rounds as a professional. Roman, a lot of experience, 233. Fulton's 27, Roman 32. Fulton turned pro at 2014, Roman 2010. They both fight from an orthodox stance. Comparable dimensions, Fulton 5'6.5", Roman 5'5". A little reach advantage for Fulton, 70.5 inches, 68 for Roman. As we know, Fulton is from Philly, and Roman is from a city that's near and dear to my heart, Los Angeles, California.
Man, I love this matchup. What, in your opinion, makes it so special?
I think the skill level of both guys, they're both polished, experienced technicians, just really at the highest level. So no matter what unfolds in the ring, we're going to see a high level of skill, which I always appreciate. And while neither guy is a big puncher, I think both of them have a fighting spirit. I think that's very clear. They'll both do whatever they believe it will take to get the victory, no matter what that is. You know, sort of as Fulton showed against Figueroa, that was a tough fight.
Yeah.
He did what it took to win the fight.
Yeah, bit down. Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it when you said polished. I mean, along with being two of the division's best, these are two of the best pure boxers in the sport today, two of the best counterpunchers. What do you think of that style matchup?
It couldn't be much different from Fulton's last fight, which again was against Brandon Figueroa, who's a relentless pressure fighter. I don't think Fulton would have much trouble against most aggressive opponents, but that opponent was a special aggressive opponent. Again, this fight's more of boxer versus boxer, which probably suits, I think it probably suits Fulton better. Roman even used the term chess match during my interview with him. That's what we might see at least for a little while, but I think a fight's going to break out.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's going to be incredible. I wonder who's going to lead and who can impose their will. What does Fulton need to do in order to win?
I think both guys need to do the same thing, so I can cover both guys with this response. And I'm borrowing from what Roman told me in the interview I mentioned. I think when you have two boxers this good, it's the guy who can make the better adjustments during the fight who's going to win the fight. In other words, who's more clever, on any given night. Also, this could be the kind of fight where the loser will say, "Damn, I wish I'd thrown more punches." I can see a lot of posturing in this fight. Both of these guys need to be busy if they hope to have their hand raised.
Yeah, I agree with you. What are the keys to victory for Roman?
I think it's exactly the same. I think when you get guys with like almost the exact same style, neither guy is a big puncher. I wouldn't say that they're exactly the same, but they're really similar. Even Roman acknowledged that. So I think it's the same thing. I think it's making the adjustments. Let's see who's the smarter boxer. And who knows? You know what? And avoid, neither guy has a lot of power, but listen, they have some power. So you also you can't be reckless. But these aren't the kind of guys that are going to be reckless. So I think we're going to have the chess match. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
What does a win here mean for either fighter?
Fulton. I'd be careful how I say this, but I think Fulton might have taken a very, very small hit by, narrowly getting past Figueroa, although I'm not sure that's fair because Figueroa is a really, really good fighter. Still, I think an impressive victory for Fulton would make us forget all about that fight and just sort of be another step towards stardom. I think that he's marching towards stardom, even if it's not a perfect march. For Roman, man, a victory for Roman would be a breakthrough defining victory for him. He's been known as an excellent boxer for quite a long time, but a win on Saturday would lift him to like a different level of prestige and the earning power that goes with that. A victory would just be enormous for Roman.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think both guys, I think a victory for either guy is incredible here. These are two of the best in the game, in my opinion. What's your prediction?
Yeah, I almost hate to make a prediction because I have so much respect for both guys. Since I have to, I just think that Fulton might be a little better across the board, meaning the fight will be competitive, but Fulton will get more accomplished, if you will. I just think he's going to outbox Roman by just a little bit or just enough to win the fight. So I'm going to say Fulton by a close but unanimous decision.
I like it. I like Fulton. My very close decision here, and a beautiful back and forth battle with some breathtaking exchanges. Now in the co-feature, rising undefeated 168-pound sensation David Morrell Jr. takes on Calvin Henderson. You see the adjectives I gave to Morrell. What makes him so good?
Morrell is just so advanced for a guy with 6 pro fights. He has God-given ability. He has that schooling in the Cuban amateur system, meaning he's already a polished boxer. His confidence and poise, I think, comes from that experience. And on top of everything else, he can punch. So he appears to be a complete package. But it's still early. I mean, the jury's still out on him, but I really like what I see.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned the amateur record, 135-2 in the amateurs. That smooth southpaw boxing style. He's got the poise and confidence of a 10-year veteran, plus a damn good trainer in Ronnie Shields. I mean, put all those things together, and you can understand why folks are excited. What about Henderson? What can you tell us about him?
He's a good fighter, a solid guy, and he has quite a bit of power, actually. His last 7 victories have come by knockout. He also seems to be durable. Tough guy in addition to the other part that I mentioned. 2 problems, though. He hasn't faced anyone near Morrell's ability. The closest probably being Isaiah Stein, who's a pretty good fighter. And Henderson got outpointed. He got outpointed by Steen. And he drew with a journeyman whose name I can't even pronounce in 2019. So I think he's vulnerable in terms of boxing, but I think that Morrell needs to look out for this guy's power because he could crack.
Yeah, sounds like it's going to be an interesting test here. How important is it that Morrell make a statement, or are you just looking at him to get the W?
I'll echo what the fighters say. It's always important to make a statement. These guys need to do more than merely win to build names for themselves. I always think of Emmanuel Stewart when I think of that, because he always understood the value of a spectacular win, a spectacular knockout. They need to do something the fans remember. Now, that said, of course, winning is the primary objective. So if you win, it's a good night.
Yeah, I think it's important he makes a statement as well. The guy's been calling out David Benavidez. I think he has to show that he's levels beyond where Henderson is at. What's your prediction?
I think if Morrell can stay clear of Henderson's power, he's going to be fine. I can see Morrell outclassing Henderson, landing more and more punches as the fight progresses and just breaking him down. Henderson's never been stopped. I think Morrell might do that. I'm going to say KO 9.
I like it. I'm going with Morrell by decision, but I like the stoppage pick there. Let's jump right into the week in review. Last Saturday, an electric, record-breaking crowd of 18,970 people showed up at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, as Premier Boxing Champions presented a 4-card Showtime pay-per-view, and in the main event, undefeated 5-time world champion Gervonta Tank Davis successfully defended his WBA world lightweight title in highlight reel fashion, of course, knocking out top contender Rolando Romero with a single left hand in the 6th round. Mike, it felt like boxing was on top of the world on Saturday night.
Tell me, that atmosphere must have been amazing. Tell me what that was like.
You just had to be there. I mean, there were so many fellow boxers in attendance. There were the crowd, obviously, record-breaking, biggest crowd ever at the Barclays Center. I've never gotten so many ticket and credential requests from friends and acquaintances and colleagues in my life. Then you look at all the celebs who posted about the fight from, their social media platforms, from Drake to LeBron James, Odell Beckham, Lamar Jackson, everyone. But back to the venue. Those near 19,000 people, almost all of them were there to see Tank Davis, period. I mean, you had Madonna, Michael Strahan, Naomi Osaka, Cat Williams, Trippie Redd, 40 Cal, Benny the Butcher, Emmanuel Quickly, the Giants draft picks, Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal, Stephon Diggs, Chase Young, Tracy Morgan, Lance Stevenson. The list goes on. Basically, everyone who was somebody was there. The atmosphere was just incredible. And I want to comment on this. To me, Tank is sort of an IQ test for fight fans. He's not from my era. I remember when we had him on our show, and I asked him, who'd you grow up listening to? And he said Rihanna. And, I grew up listening to Anita Baker. That's like 2 generations apart. So it's just kind of crazy. But I think that hardcore boxing fans and specifically boxing media should take note. Certain members panned the event. Certain members didn't even cover it in the build up to the fight. Now, look, if you didn't cover it, and it ends up being this huge success without your coverage, without you writing anything about it. What does that mean about you? Why make yourself irrelevant? Do the smart thing, do the right thing, get on board. Don't end up on the Summer Jam screen. It is not too late. But some of you curmudgeons are standing in the same spot, and you're slowly receding from the rear view mirror as the game passes you by. Take note. I also think I should point out how on edge the country is at this time. There was some sort of disturbance afterward. I think someone's car exhaust or a tire popped a block or two away from the venue, but folks were so scared. Folks reacted so much that they ran back into the venue thinking it might have been, some other shooting or something. Obviously, it was nothing like that. So, again, shame on the media members who tweeted that it was. I think one genius even tweeted that there was a shooting inside the Barclays, which is just absurd. But still, it just goes to show that the kind of climate that we're in now, which is, it's disheartening. Let's get back to the fight, though. Or before the fight, I should say. Leading up to Saturday night, Davis was, really relaxed while Rolly was doing all the trash talking. What did you think of that?
I think Rolly was mostly just trying to sell the fight, which is what Tank more or less said afterward. Maybe Rolly was also trying to sell himself. How many chances does a guy get to be on that kind of stage?
Yeah.
And maybe he was trying to convince himself of all the things he said would happen. Davis, from Davis's perspective, he's made a concerted effort to avoid all the BS. I just don't think he wants to do it. And I think he wants maybe an image that's a little bit different. I'm not even sure what his image has been, but I think he wants to be like, avoid all the BS. That's the best way to put it. I think that's one reason that he didn't say very much at all. In the end, all of Rolly's talk was good for the promotion, I think.
It was. What did you think of Davis's performance?
Terrific performance. Patiently, carefully, took his time figuring this guy out, which wasn't easy, by the way. And by the fifth round, I think he found his groove and started landing some hard, accurate shots. I just started to see a shift in the fifth round. And finally, he did what Tank does. He found an opening and bam, fight over. I think he was a little surprised that it came down exactly the way that it did, because Romero just walked right into a punch. He compared it to the Pacquiao, when Pacquiao was knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez. But in a way, it was kind of similar. But I wasn't surprised at all. Davis keeps delivering spectacular knockouts, with the Cruz fight being the exception, but he hurt his hand in that fight and still won the fight. The guy's amazing.
Yeah, he really, really is. And I think his ring IQ was on display there, and sort of how he waited for Rolly to settle down before he fully settled in. What is Tank's ceiling?
From a boxing perspective, it's really, really high. I would say him and Boots Ennis have the highest upside because of their combination of ability and power. And as you said, we talked about this earlier, and you said off the podcast, Shakur Stevenson is right there also. So maybe those three. Tank could end up number one pound for pound one day if he could continue to whack guys out, even as his opposition gets tougher and tougher. It's already been tough opposition, but as it gets tougher and tougher, if he keeps knocking people out like this, I think it's almost his destiny.
Yeah, I think so as well. He's got everything. He has everything, and I keep saying that. Did Rolly surprise you with his performance?
To some degree, he did. Think about what that guy has done. He came into that fight, if the reports are accurate, he came into that fight with a total of 49 fights under his belt. And that's amateur and pro. That's nothing. 49 total fights is nothing. And he boxed competitively with a guy like Tank for 5+ rounds. You need to think about that. He jabbed well. His defense was solid. He moved well. I really believe that Romero is sort of a natural, if you will. He looked good in the fight. He was just in with a special opponent, and as he said repeatedly after the fight, he got caught, and boy, did he get caught.
Yeah, he certainly did. And look, he was a big, strong, athletic, powerful lightweight. You had to figure that, it was that he was live in that fight and had some good wins, some overlooked wins coming into that fight. Who should Romero face next?
I think he has to take a small step back now. That's what happens when you're knocked out like that, even against a pound for pound guy. That said, I wouldn't step too far back. Maybe he fights Isaac Cruz. Maybe somebody like Joseph Diaz Jr. I'll always throw out Richard Comey, might be a good fight for him. Guys at that level. But I think he's competitive with all these guys. Maybe he beats all these guys.
Yeah, I like the Cruz fight. Michel Rivera, maybe Frank Martin down the line. Although Frank Martin has a pretty tough assignment in Ricardo Nunez on June 4th, but um, you know, not June 4th. I'm sorry, June 18th. But I love all those names for him. Now in the co-main, Erislandy Lara dominated Gary Spike O'Sullivan to retain his WBA middleweight title via 8th round TKO. Mike, what were your thoughts on Lara's performance?
Good performance. It's sort of amazing that he could change his style and still be effective as he's done. He just beat the you-know-what out of a decent fighter in O'Sullivan. I think that speaks to his unusual ability. He's really one of the best fighters of the last couple decades. That said, he's been beating second-tier guys last couple of years. I want to see him against the next-level guy, which is what he's aiming for, obviously. He wants to make, one more run at a championship at 160 pounds this time. I'll be curious to see how he does at 40+.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think this version, 39-year-old version of Lara, would fare against the other elite 160 pounders?
He lost to Jarrett Hurd at 154 and drew with Brian Castano at the same weight in consecutive fights a few years ago. I was wondering at that time if it was sort of the beginning of his decline. I like the way he's looked since the Castano fight, but again, he's fought second-tier guys. My gut feeling is that he could be competitive with anyone at 160. He's always been a tricky opponent, and I don't think that's changed.
Yeah, and I think it's time for him to face an elite 160 pounder.
Yeah.
Let's get to it. Whether it's Jamal Charlo or Carlos Adames, but let's see him in against the top guys. Also on the card, unbeaten 154 pounder Jesus Ramos won a 10-round unanimous decision over Luke Santamaria. What did we learn about Ramos in this fight?
I think he's still growing, which is appropriate for a 21-year-old. He complained that he couldn't look his best because Santamaria wouldn't fight with him. Well, what did he expect? Santamaria is the smaller guy and a boxer to boot. His only chance to win, to be competitive, was to stick and move, which is what he did. And Ramos had trouble cutting off the ring. He'll get better and better, at that fight by fight. Overall, though, it was a good performance by Ramos. I thought he controlled the second half of the fight and won going away. So it was a good night for him, but he's still learning.
Yeah, good learning experience for him.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on Santamaria's performance?
Again, I thought he had the right strategy, and he had some success in the first half of the fight. I think Ramos just found a groove, and Santamaria got a little worn down in the second half. But I think Santamaria is a terrific boxer who was in with the wrong guy.
Yeah, I think so. And the problem for Santamaria is that, based off this performance, I don't know too many others are going to be in a rush to get in the ring with him. Where does Ramos go from here?
Well, I would continue to fight guys at Santamaria's level for a while. He's 21. There's no rush. Let him learn. I see him fighting for a world title, say, before he's 23. So he's got a handful more fights to get more polished.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he just needs to stay the course and continue doing what he's doing and learning. These are the kind of fights that he will grow from. In the pay-per-view opener, super featherweight contender Eduardo Ramirez edged out a 10-round majority decision over Luis Melendez. And in the prediction league, Mike and I remain tied at 24 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw. It's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe. This week, we revisit a hot topic: 5 potential fights for Gervonta Tank Davis. The man said ain't no safety on this clock, and we've got a few names we'd like to see him paired up with. We'll go in ascending order. So, Mike, take it away.
Okay, I just wanted to preface this real quickly by saying that these are sort of just dream fights for me, and I didn't really take, weight into account, even though it probably is a factor, and, alliances and, that kind of thing. It's just sort of the dream fights that I have that are they're potential fights. Some are more likely than others. Anyway, so here goes. Number 5 for me is a former 135 pounder, now moved up to 140, Teofimo Lopez. Tank mentioned and then sort of dismissed the possibility of going down to 130. So I doubt he'd go up to 140, even though this used to be one of the fights that people talked about for a long time. I love the matchup. Maybe they could do it at a catch weight, like 137 or something like that. Lopez is coming off his upset loss to George Kambosos Jr., so he'd be on fire, I think, in terms of motivation. And it'd be an enormous event given Lopez's reputation and Tank's popularity. So, yeah, that'd be a lot of fun to see that fight.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that fight, to be honest with you. I feel like Lopez is got some unfinished business there, as you sort of pointed out, and he I don't know. I feel like also mentally he's got some stuff that he needs to get over just based on how he's reacted to that loss to George Kambosos. And based on that loss to George Kambosos, I'd say he's an early knockout waiting to happen against Gervonta Tank Davis, but the trash talk, the build-up to that fight would be something ridiculous. I mean, those guys would be going back and forth, and
and all the stuff you mentioned, all the stuff you mentioned would be part of the promotion too. Like, is Lopez ready? Could he be ready after what happened against? It's all part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 5 is probably not ready, but he is the number 1 contender to Gervonta Davis, and that is Michel Rivera. A different style for Tank to take on, a smooth boxer with some good pop in his right hand, throwback skills. And I like the matchup. I don't know how the promotion would go with Tank versus Ali, but it should be interesting.
Yeah, I actually think that Rivera would have a chance against Davis. That's how much respect I have for Rivera. But there's a couple things working against it. As you mentioned, maybe it's a little bit too early. I think that Tank and company would probably want Rivera to build his reputation a little bit more, to build the fight into a bigger event kind of thing. It'd be a big event, any event that he could fight me and it would be a big event. But I think that he might want to wait a little while to fight a guy like Rivera, like almost too much risk for too little gain kind of thing.
Right. Oh man. So let's move on. Let's go into number 4. I'll kick this one off. My number 4 is the undisputed 140-pound champion, Josh Taylor. This is a fight I've wanted for some time for Gervonta Davis. Not you new jacks who all of a sudden think it's an intriguing fight now that you saw Taylor against Jack Catterall and you thought Catterall won. I've always loved this fight for Tank Davis. That's because I'd be hard pressed to pick Tank over anyone from 130 to 140. But I like the matchup of styles. I like Tank's ring IQ here and his ability to set up shots. I do think that Taylor's size would pose some problems for him. I just like the challenge for Tank, and I think Tank pulls this one out.
Yeah, I really like that fight a lot. So when I prefaced this, I said weight wasn't a factor, but Taylor crossed my mind, but it just didn't seem likely, especially because Tank made a reference to 130. And now he's going to stay at 35, he said, but he sort of made a reference to 130, sort of implying that he could get down to 130. So
only 133. I mean,
right. So going up to 40 against a guy like Taylor doesn't seem practical, but as far as the dream matchup, yeah, it's fabulous. I guess one reason I would choose Lopez over Taylor is because of weight, because Lopez was just a lightweight. So on some level, it kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Although Lopez is going 140, I believe.
Yes.
Who you got for number 4?
So number 4, I have a guy we mentioned earlier, Shakur Stevenson. As I said, Davis, Stevenson, and Boots Ennis might be the top 3 young fighters in the world. Imagine 2 of them doing battle at this stage of the game, young, prime guys. I think it would be a tough fight for Stevenson, who would have to move up in weight. He doesn't have a ton of punching power, but he's such a superb boxer that he would definitely be competitive against anybody, I think. And I think he'd do the fight too. He's already called out Tank, so I'm not sure that fight's going to happen next or real soon, but it'll probably happen somewhere down the line.
Yeah, it will. I didn't put him there just because I think I'm saving that for last. I think that those 2 might end up being the last 2 standing, and that it'll ultimately be a super fight. They seem to think the same way too. I love that fight. I mean, I absolutely love that fight. My number 3, I couldn't really choose one since they're fighting in a few days. So the winner of the George Kambosos Devin Haney fight, I think is an obvious candidate to face Gervonta Davis and determine who is the man at 135 pounds. As Kevin Iole said in his article a few days ago, no one can say they're the man at 135 until they get in the ring with Gervonta Tank Davis. And that's I would love to see either one. The build-up for both would be great. I can't wait.
So that's why it's on my list, but a little bit higher. So I'll talk about that in a minute. My number 3 is your favorite fighter of the era, Vasily Lomachenko. Lomachenko still has a big name. I think if Tank beats him, it would be a significant feather in his cap, and obviously he'd have a good chance to win that fight, although I don't think it would necessarily be an easy fight. Figuring out Romero is one thing. Doing the same with Lomachenko would be something else. It would be a little bit harder. As a fan, I just love to see how Tank would try to do that and whether he would be successful. It's an intriguing fight for me as a fan. And I think fans in general would embrace the fight, which obviously is important.
Yeah, it's absolutely an intriguing fight, and I can't wait to see how Tank would break him down and get him out of there. Let's go to number 2. You want to kick this one off?
Sure. When you had Kambosos and Haney at number 3, made me think that maybe this choice should be number 1, but I went back and forth. Anyway, it landed at number 2 for me, Ryan Garcia. This is just a natural because of their social media following. Both guys are really, really popular, which would make the promotion just enormous. I think it would just do really well. Really good pay-per-view numbers, for example. But from a boxing standpoint, it'd also be a great matchup. We've already said a lot about Tank, what his strengths are. Garcia seems to have a lot of the same qualities. He's a good boxer. He's super quick. He's a big puncher. He's got charisma. I think if you just put titles aside, this is the most exciting possible matchup for Gervonta Davis.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the biggest matchup. It's also my number 2. And also, I think one of the more dangerous. Garcia's got the dimensions. He's got the quickness, the power, the athleticism, and the confidence that he can beat Gervonta Davis. Plus, he's, folks talk about his experience. It's a pretty accomplished amateur we're talking about here. And you add all those ingredients, then you added the fact that look, I mean, these are 2 of the biggest names in the sport. We saw Garcia do a $1 million gate in his last fight. Of course, Tank has done 4 or 5 times that much, but I think that is a fight that could potentially do 1 million pay-per-view buys. So easily the biggest fight on my list and the most intriguing. All right, let's go to number 1. Who you got?
So I have the winner of Kambosos, Haney, and I'll explain why. You've sort of alluded to this. I'm pretty sure that Davis right now is the best 135-pounder. Let's just cut to the chase. Whoever wins the Kambosos-Haney fight will be considered the king of the division in terms of titles. Those would be the ultimate stakes for Davis to ascend to the throne, to fulfill what seems to be his destiny. And who wouldn't want to see that fight, whether it's Kambosos or Haney? It would be enormous. So I just think that would be like his coronation, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that determines who is the big man at 135 pounds. My number 1 is none other than Vasily Lomachenko. It is the fight I want for Tank, because for the most part, Lomachenko is the highest rated fighter pound for pound on most people's list, incorrectly in my opinion, but that's all the more reason why I want to see Tank fight him. I think you bring a good point when you said, Lomachenko's obviously no Romero. To be, different for Tank to break down, and I don't think it would be an easy fight, but I think in some ways it might be easier than Romero in some ways now, in that I think Tank had to be cautious of Romero's size, strength, and power. He wouldn't have those issues with Lomachenko, and Lomachenko will be going in against somebody who's faster than he is, and he can pivot all he wants, but his ribs will be right there. I still remember the Orlando Salido fight, and I can't wait to see how Tank stops this guy. So hopefully that fight happens in the future. That is going to do it for this week's show. Don't forget, guys, Saturday night, Premier Boxing Champions returns with the world title bout in the Showtime Championship Boxing main event as undefeated Stephen Fulton Jr., one of the world's finest, defenses WBC and WBO world 122-pound titles against Danny Roman. We'll be back to break that down next week and much more right here on the PBC Podcast.